staying healthy, staying sexy, staying young is what living life is all about. And if you have doctors that have proven treatments that keep people young and healthy so they don't get sick, you want people to know about these treatments and that they exist.
This episode is brought to you by Gainswave. Gainswave is a treatment done at your doctor's office to optimize erection quality without the needs of Viagra, Cialis. It's non-surgical, there's no needles, and it has an amazing success rate. To find a Gainswave provider, go to gainswave.com. That's GAINSWAVE.com. Hello, this is Mark L. White with Health Hacks, and I am here with my good friend, Dr. Joan Rosenberg. How are you, Dr. Joan?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Mark.
So we actually met a year ago, and a lot of times when I'm doing these podcasts, I'm talking to people for the first time, but I remember distinctly spending about 20 minutes talking to you about some of my anxiety and stuff going on in my life. And you were very calming, and you talked to me a little bit about the Rosenberg reset. So one, it's really special to spend this time with you, and I'm excited you're here. And two, hopefully you can help more people and share some of the things that you've learned over the years.
Happy to, and it's always a treat. So I welcome the opportunity for us to chat.
Awesome. I guess my first question is, you've been doing this now for decades, 40, 50 years.
40 plus, yes. 40, 45 if I have to be honest. Yes.
Okay. So what is it what's did you have an aha moment or something that really, you went off that you latched on that you really put out there?
You know what, I would say there were many moments, and then it was being awake enough to the moments to be able to string them together and understand that I had something that was useful and really made a difference in helping people's lives. So I wouldn't say it was any given one moment, but it was many moments strung together.
When you were young, did you have a lot of anxiety, a lot of doubt, a lot of lack of confidence, or were you always a confident person?
I would not say I was always a confident person. I wouldn't describe myself as having a lot of anxiety, but I was very, very shy, and I like to say exquisitely shy. And though my mother identified me as probably exquisitely sensitive, I certainly railed against that early in life. Mm-hmm. But I think both were true, that I was quite shy and I was quite sensitive. And in terms of kind of picking up on cues in the environment and feeling impacted. And I saw the people around me, my peers, kind of all gathered together, laughing, joyful, seeming to be well connected to each other. And I didn't have that experience. I had an experience of feeling alone, feeling different, feeling left out or excluded, and feeling like I didn't belong. So I really struggled through certainly a good bit of my childhood and aspects of my adolescence too, that there was a carryover. And so during those all that time in my life, and as I got older, I was left with the big question is wait a minute, they seem so confident. That's not my experience. How does someone get what they have?
When somebody lacks confidence, and I've had my times in life growing up, my childhood, I wasn't the most confident person, but how much of that is related to childhood? How much of that is genetics? And how much of that can we relearn?
I think that we can relearn a high percent. So I'm going to probably guess even in the 60 to 80% range or better. Certainly genetics is at play. Certainly the kind of life experiences we had that were difficult or in some ways damaging, those have an impact too. But my experience is that we can still, because the brain is neuroplastic, we can work through those experiences. We can come out on the other side and we can still develop confidence and understand that our life history is a bridge into something more, not that it's the thing that we're just left with and can't overcome.
Sometimes when you talk to psychologists, say, versus like life coaches, a psychologist wants to dig and find the reasons why you act a certain way and really delve into childhood and experiences, which is painful for some people.
Right.
And life coaches are like, it doesn't matter, forget your past. Let's learn a new way of thinking.
Right. Right.
Being a trained psychologist, I'd like to hear your aspects of how much should we delve into our past versus just like not thinking about it.
Well, the not thinking about it doesn't work. We can try to contain it and we can try to push it away. It will find its ways to surface. So I think that those who are willing and are open, there is real benefit in being able to do what I call make sense of our life stories. Mm-hmm. So that if we experience if we've gone through difficult life experiences, that there is a way to actually make sense of what we've been through and to grow from it, to eventually understand the impact and meaning it had on our lives, and to also potentially take some good from it and understand how it shaped us along the way. Only then, after we've made sense of it, to be able to kind of put it behind us.
I think one of your gifts, and again, I read your book, The 90-Second Reset.
It was 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. That's the name of the book. Yeah.
And I remember the 90-second reset, though, as being an amazing formula and really simplifying something that's very complicated and explaining it to people. And I was wondering if you could share with our audience what that's all about.
Sure. Well, let me tag it on to where I started, because the first question that I was left with as I was growing up was, how does somebody develop confidence? And as I got into my professional life, there was a second question that kind of emerged, and that is, what made it so difficult for people to handle or to tolerate unpleasant feelings? And it turns out, Mark, that the answer to the second question about unpleasant feelings actually, in my mind, answers the first question about how we develop confidence. So let me go to that second question, though, in terms of, because the 90-second reset has to do with handling unpleasant feelings. So what in trying to answer that question, and again, this is where the aha moments kind of got strung together, wasn't until the neuroscience findings came out that I was able to kind of put together the formula. And the formula is 1 choice, 8 feelings, 90 seconds. That's the reset. 1 choice, 8 feelings, 90 seconds. And the 1 choice is for people to choose to be as aware of and in touch with as much of their moment-to-moment experience as possible. So it's leaning into what we experience on a moment-to-moment basis as opposed to avoiding. So the key is awareness as opposed to avoidance. And so my thing is, please choose awareness. It makes a big difference. Lean into the feeling.
Sometimes we get so lost in our thoughts that we don't realize we're experiencing anxiety or depression or feelings of insecurity.
Right. And my view is that when we can be aware of our thinking on top of our feelings, that we can actually, when we're able to change that, we also can pull ourselves away from the depression, the anxiety, and other kind of and doubts and things like that. So there really is a way to work with both thoughts and feelings that's pretty effective.
Is it really about just training ourselves to recognize when we're not feeling well and then making that choice and going through it?
I would say, well, I want people to lean into it and understand that feelings are they're not permanent. Our thoughts, if we stay thinking about the same kind of thing over and over and over again, it's going to pull up all of the unpleasant feelings that might be related to that. And that's part of the reason it feels like unpleasant feelings linger, or that's part of the reason we start to feel depressed. So how we experience and express our feelings, and how and what we think are also very important. So those, I listen to those 4 things.
Now, sometimes we find ourselves overthinking, and sometimes I know that I'm aware of when I'm anxious and I'm overthinking something, but I still find it difficult to stop thinking about it. Is there, when you say lean in, if you can describe what does that mean? Embrace the negative feelings, or?
Well, okay, so let me go back to that. So yeah, so if I go back to the one choice, 8 feelings, 90 seconds. Yes, I do. So again, we're choosing awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to lean into the feeling. So I'm talking about having people lean into 8 feelings, 8 unpleasant feelings, and I don't consider them bad or uncomfortable, because actually our unpleasant feelings are designed, or were designed, if you will, to help protect us. So they're actually there for protective purposes. We just don't think of them in that way because they feel uncomfortable. But the 8 feelings are sadness, shame, helplessness, anger, vulnerability, embarrassment, disappointment, and frustration. And what I've been able to notice is that if people can handle those 8 feelings, they negotiate life pretty well, and they start to feel much more capable in the world. So what I'm wanting to people to, when they start to experience those feelings, is not to move away from them, but instead to kind of allow themselves to feel those feelings, and to let the feelings kind of move through. And which takes me to kind of the third part, and that's the 90-second piece. What neuroscience suggested, or neuroscientists have suggested, is that first off, most of us tend to experience, or come to know our experience of emotional feelings through bodily sensation. And it turns out that when a feeling gets triggered, that the rush of biochemicals that cause those bodily sensations both kind of rush into our bloodstream and then flush out of our bloodstream in roughly 90 seconds. So the way that I want to encourage people to lean into the feelings is to have an understanding that it's short-lived bodily sensations that help them know what they're feeling that they're trying to avoid. So if they know that they're short-lived, if they know it's a bodily sensation, then people can stay present to that and stay with the wave, if you will, or one or more waves, and be able to lean into the feeling as opposed to run away from it.
Now, it's one of the things I struggle with sometimes is being very assertive with people and hurting people. And I've learned how to talk to people and say,
Sure.
what's on my mind. But sometimes when I do that, I come across as a prick, or as too aggressive.
Okay.
And so like, I want to be assertive,
Right.
but I find those unpleasant feelings in me when I'm trying to build up the confidence to say what's on my mind. What would you recommend for that?
Well, again, my mantra is to be positive, kind, and well-intended. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is start from that place. That what you want to say to somebody, even if it's something that's potentially upsetting, mm-hmm. that you're coming from a kind and well-intended place. You're not doing it in an effort to damage anybody. And that may take some of the prickness out of the way, and if there's aggressiveness there, it might take that out of the way too. And with speaking up, what's interesting to me is that most people who struggle with speaking up and saying the things they want to say often think that difficulty speaking up is a speaking problem. And in my mind, difficulty speaking up is not a speaking problem. It's a difficulty tolerating unpleasant feeling problem. And so the same thing holds here. It's understanding that part of the reason you may not want to talk to somebody and say the things that you believe you need to say or want to say, it's really because you don't want to tolerate the unpleasant feelings that you may have or that they may experience once you speak to them. And it's all tied up in being able to manage those 8 unpleasant feelings.
So once you're comfortable with these 8 unpleasant feelings, then your life opens up and you can achieve whatever you want.
That's my pure belief. Absolutely. 100% true.
I love that. How about like being empathetic with people and kind and putting yourself in those shoes? I find that my wife tells me, Mark, you're not empathetic. Uh-huh. I'm over here trying to learn how to be empathetic. Do you have advice on how to be more empathetic to others?
I do. Yes, I do. And this is especially particularly true for men. So it's a great question coming from you, Mark, and especially men in relationship with women, that most times when a woman wants to be listened to, what they want you to do is to listen to their feelings first. So
I'm going to take notes here for my wife.
Please. And so the goal here is, men are great at problem solving, and men listen to everybody from a problem solving stance. But what I want you to understand is that the problem solve in listening to women is actually to respond to their feelings first. So listen for the feeling tone, or listen to the specific feelings that the individual has stated, and then speak to those first. So it might be, oh, wow, it sounds like you were really sad, or you were really frustrated, or that was a difficult and painful thing that you went through. And if you just say that first, and by the way, it works with men too, if you just say that first, people tend to feel more well understood and feel like you're being empathic with them. And then the real problem solving you can open up to.
So even if my wife is being completely irrational,
correct,
it still works. Like understanding her feelings,
right? Right.
Or, I'm sorry you feel that way. What can I do?
No. You don't even have to say I'm sorry, and you also don't have to say what can I do. You just say, sounds like that was really painful. Sounds like you were really frustrated. Sounds like that was so disappointing. Whatever it was, you just respond to the feeling state and let it unfold from there.
Now, I meet a lot of people who are victims, and I see this everybody's a victim of something, and I see politicians and businesses that take advantage of that. How do we be aware of when we create our own destiny and stay away from victimhood?
The thing I would say is listen to how much you blame, and listen to how much you hold bitterness, resentfulness, or grudges. If you're living in that way, then you're holding people outside of yourself as responsible, and that maintains a little bit more of a victim stance. If we take blame off the table, and you deal with the real grief that's involved with either the blame, the resentfulness, the bitterness, or the grudges, then you start to take more responsibility for your life, and then have more capacity to actually design your life rather than feel like you're a victim to it.
Now, I know in the book you talk about this concept of grief.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Well, what I talk about here is, I talk about grief in a couple different ways. When I think about grief, and what we might consider a common or normal grief, the grief is tied to most typically to some kind of relationship loss. And so whether it's loss through death or separation, or it's loss of a person or loss of a pet, that's kind of our first take on it. And I think of the feelings of sadness, helplessness, anger, and disappointment as being kind of underneath that grief. That grief is comprised, if you will, of at least those four feelings. And I also believe that there's a lot of grief that people experience, but it doesn't get classified as grief. So when I was mentioning resentment or bitterness or grudges or blame earlier, or even pessimism or cynicism or sarcasm, I think that there's what I call disguised grief underneath those feeling states. And so that what I want people to do, again, still the same thing, sadness, helplessness, anger, disappointment, but it's disguised in blame, or it's disguised in bitterness. And what I would prefer people do is actually kind of go underneath those more toxic reactions, recognize the grief that's going on, what it's tied to, and then to understand the impact and meaning those experiences held for the individual, so that they can work through and actually resolve the feelings.
So if somebody has grief from childhood that
Yes.
is causing somebody to act a certain way, like for example, I lost my father when I was 21 years old.
Okay.
But I don't think I've ever really truly processed that. Is it important to process it because it's going to eliminate some of these uncomfortable feelings going forward, or like what if you don't want to process that? Like how would you?
Well, you know what, again, I that's where I think some of it's like the grief doesn't just disappear. And if you've never processed it, then you've never allowed yourself to kind of take the time to understand the impact that it had on your life. And there may be ways, for instance, there may be ways that, let's say and I don't know the circumstances, and I'm sorry that you had a loss early in life like that. But let's say that he died a sudden death.
Mm-hmm.
But that you've never really kind of fully grieved it, and you never understood that maybe if you carried anxiety post that and didn't have it before that maybe some of the anxiety you carry is tied to an anticipation of sudden and unexpected losses. But that if you took the time to step back and go, you know, what impact did that have on me at 21? What was it like for me to lose my dad? You know, and I, somebody I could have looked up to as I grew into my own adulthood, or what kind of a guy did I become? What kind of a man did I become? Or what kind of a father did I become? Mm-hmm. Because I lost him early. You know, who did I become because of this? And I think that when we allow ourselves to make sense of those experiences, we experience relief, and we're able to understand aspects of our life that we never perhaps understood before. You know, and I just talked with somebody yesterday, Mark, a client of mine, who I'm not seeing for a little bit right now, but on her own, she's using the process that I talk about in the book to deal with what I call this disguised grief. And her description to me is that she's feeling lighter and more confident and clearer. And that it's just by taking the time to sit through and think about experiences that she hadn't wanted to think about before, she's able to make sense of her life in a way that actually kind of makes the thread of her own life narrative more coherent to her. It makes more sense to her. It's like things are strung together in a more logical way. And she feels lighter, clearer, and more confident. It's like, that's awesome. So there's much value, if you will, for taking the time to make sense of that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to do it on your own. So when I lost my dad, he died suddenly. He died of a suicide.
Oh, okay.
Which is really tough.
Right. Yep.
And I had to take care of my younger brother, and my parents had just gone through a divorce. And so I never really came to terms with it. I still had to show up. And then, later, like years later, I moved down to South Florida and started my own family. And I think sometimes I have that, I don't know, with the kids, I sometimes experience a little anger, and I don't like to think about it. I think that's tough.
Got it. And so what I would say to you, if you're open to it, is that the anger is trying to inform you of something. And that if you just take some quiet time and allow yourself to understand what the anger is trying to tell you, and to try to identify what triggers that or how it relates to your kids. And it may be that you got gypped and they're not, right? That or who knows what, right? That will actually allow you to move through some of the leftover grief that might be related to your dad's suicide.
I think also I feel more driven because of that, and because of other factors. I've always been a driven person,
right?
But I think that to me is a double-edged sword, because like when things are going good, you feel great, but then when you have a setback in any aspect of your life, it affects you more.
Sure, I understand. And what I want to be encouraging of is sometimes if you can make use of those calm times to actually make sense of the more difficult stuff, you actually open yourself to even more joy and more good stuff. So, or more goodness. So I can only be encouraging in that way. And so.
How does like things like meditation or, living in presence? I mean, now we're addicted to our phones, and I think that for sure, like raising kids, I see my kids always on social media, and they always care about other people's likes. And I know
Right.
that can't be that's not healthy.
No, it's not. I mean, the thing that I would advocate for, especially in this kind of a time period, is times when the phones are away, and what's happening is face-to-face, heart-to-heart activity, so that children have a way to learn how to actually develop good, healthy relationships and understand that they actually really occur face-to-face and not through some artificial like on a social media page. That's one thing. The second thing is helping children understand that their best health and well-being is going to come from inside out, in terms of the kinds of ways they want to live their life and the kinds of dreams they have and want to pursue. And it's not going to come ever from how others perceive them. And in fact, if they're too caught up in how they think others perceive them, they sort of turn a little bit into a human pretzel and are trying to contort themselves to be what they think other people want them to be. And then they really lose a sense of themselves. So it's inside out, not outside in.
How does one develop confident and authentic kids?
You encourage kids to get out and take risks. And that means risks in terms of activities, and persevering in those activities. And it also means risks in terms of speaking up. So 3 or 4 different things here. I would want kids to learn how to handle the same 8 unpleasant feelings, because if they get that early, that's a carry through into adulthood. And to me, being able to handle the emotional outcome, the unpleasant feeling emotional outcome of things, is the base of confidence. So it's if I can handle those 8 unpleasant feelings, I've already developed a confident base. And the second would be being able to speak up, because I don't believe that any one of us has what I would call that rock solid confidence until we have the sense of ourselves as being able to say the things that we both want to say and need to say in any given moment. And again, I'm talking about it from a positive, kind, and well-intended manner. I'm not talking about it as being that that gives you license to be belligerent. That's not at all the way I look at this. It's speaking up, but it's speaking up from a positive, kind, and well-intended place. The third is taking risks. So it's risks to speak, because it's not that we're confident and then we speak. It's actually as we speak and through speaking we develop confidence. Mm-hmm. And the same is true for activities. So let's say a child is playing soccer, or they're playing baseball, or they're learning gymnastics or ice skating, or it doesn't matter what, a dance or a musical instrument. It doesn't matter what it is. It's that they understand that they will go through frustrations and disappointments as they learn to develop mastery in something. Mm-hmm. And if they tolerate those disappointments and those frustrations, those losses, if you will, mm-hmm. Lost soccer games, lost gymnastic meets, mm-hmm. that they then, it's through the being able to tolerate the frustrations and continuing to move on that one develops the confidence. So the same is true in terms of taking action, that it's not that we're confident and then we take action. It's that we take action, and through the action taking and through the difficult times and persevering through those difficult times, we develop the confidence. So you raise authentic kids by helping them handle unpleasant feelings, encouraging them to speak up, encouraging them to take risks and take action, and to make their way through to persevere through difficult or challenging times. You do that, kids are going to turn out pretty well.
It sounds like the most important life skill, is like really learning resilience and
Yes.
the ability to bounce back from setbacks.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. The way I define confidence, Mark, is that it's the deep sense that you can handle the emotional outcome. And that's the key, that you can handle the emotional outcome of whatever you face or whatever you pursue. And in my world, it just comes down to those 8 unpleasant feelings, because those 8 unpleasant feelings are the most common, everyday, spontaneous reactions to things not turning out the way we want.
So it's really building up our ability to master our emotions, monitor these feelings. Any other takeaways for our audience? Or
those are the key takeaways, frankly. Yeah, those are the key takeaways.
Do you have any other books coming up? Anything exciting that you're working on?
I'm working on a retreat and an online course, and then from there it will be to train other people in the approach that I use, as people are starting to ask about that. So for me, it's getting the work out into the world. So I'm always interested in opportunities to speak, like I'm talking with you today, or speaking opportunities elsewhere. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you were a TEDx speaker.
Twice, actually.
That's amazing. From a shy child to being a 2-time TEDx. Congratulations.
And I'm quite grateful. The first one is well over 1 million views at this point, and
it's amazing.
Yeah, so yes, so that just goes, if I can do it, then pretty much anybody else can do it too.
I love your message. You've changed a lot of lives. You've helped me with mine. Thank you so much for sharing your story. If somebody wanted, do you still see clients individually, or are you only seeing, are you only training people to help see clients?
No, I'm still doing both. Yes. So and if people want to connect with me, they can go to my website, drjoanrosenberg.com. And I think there's also, if people are interested, they can download a gift if they go to drjoanrosenberg.com/gift. So
we love it. Yeah. I'll put that in the show notes. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk with us and sharing with our audience. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mark. It's a real treat. Thank you so much.